Hey guys, tonight we time travel to one of the most exclusive, chaotic, and strangely dangerous social events of ancient Rome, the elite dinner party. Imagine golden couches, perfume, clouds, questionable meats, and more judgmental side eyes than a high school cafeteria. You think you'd love a Roman feast? Honestly, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You get the invitation, or more accurately, the summons. Because this isn't a hey stop by if you're free type of deal. It's an obligation wrapped in a wax-sealed scroll delivered by a slave of someone far more powerful than you, your patron, which means you're going. You're what they call a client's a client. In modern terms, you're sort of a paid friend/underling. Each morning you show up at your patron's home, do a little fawning, maybe get a few coins or a crust of bread in return. But dinner is the big leagues. Skipping it is like ghosting your boss's wedding. Career ending, socially suicidal, also rude. You don't live next door to this guy, of course. Your insula, basically, a tenement, is in a less fragrant part of the Subura, stacked high with laundry noise and more rats than citizens. But still, you have to be ready. The date has been announced, and you've spent the past week psyching yourself up and praying to household gods you barely remember. Because this isn't just food, it's theater, it's politics, it's status. It's also deeply humiliating, and historians still argue whether these dinners were genuine social bonding moments or performative traps dressed in fig leaves and goat cheese. The day of the party arrives and you're already sweating, not just from nerves, but from the Roman sun turning every cobblestone into a frying pan. You're not rich enough for a litter. That's the couch on sticks thing carried by slaves, so you're walking. Dust caking your sandals. Eyes on you, because your toga has to be just right, and nothing says desperate social climber like a toga too short, or worse, too white. You've scrubbed it with clay and chalk, but it's already picking up city grime as you trudge uphill. And it's not just about showing up. You have to show up in the right mood. Which is a fun game to play when your breakfast was a crust of old bread and you spent your afternoon getting elbowed at the communal latrines. You are hungry. You are tense. You are desperately hoping that this will go better than the last dinner party when you laughed too hard at the senator's joke and spilled spiced wine on his wife's peacock. The Roman elite live in domus grand private homes, usually with big echoing atriums and marble floors slick enough to eat sandals. As you approach, you hear the fountain burbling smell, the perfumed oil someone's sloshed in the doorway, and feel that twitchy pressure in your chest. You do not belong here, not really, and then everyone inside knows it. You're not alone. Other clients are arriving shuffling in like nervous ducklings. Some of them you know. A few are dressed better, have slicker hair, even carry little gifts, jars of honey, a small oil lamp, anything to butter the host's ego. You wish you'd thought of that. You didn't. You brought yourself. And you tried to look like a citizen. Tried. The guard at the door, the Ostiarius, has already sized you up. He's not even subtle about it. One squint, one disapproving raise of the eyebrow, and he's already deciding whether to admit you to the main dining area or stash you in the corner with the low-ranked randos eating moldy bread from wicker baskets. There's no sign, no official list. Just judgment. Pure, oily judgment. You try to look cool. You murmur the proper greeting. Salve you say, trying not to sound like you've rehearsed it. Inside your stomach is coiling. And not just because of hunger. The atrium is dim, but grand, full of shadowy statues and echoes. You walk past the household shrine, Lararium, where little figurines of ancestors and household gods grin like they know how this evening ends. You avoid eye contact. One of them might curse you. Honestly, at this point, you'd believe it. As you wait to be led to the dining room, the triclinium, you notice how slippery the floor is, how stiff the air smells with incense and roast duck. Somewhere a lyre is being plucked inexpertly. You hope it's not the host's nephew again. Last time he got experimental with his poetry, and 3 guests faked leg cramps to escape. You glance at the other guests. They're all trying too hard in different ways. One's adjusting his toga like it's armor. Another is whispering to a slave, probably trying to switch spots at the couch. Nobody here is relaxed. Roman dinner parties were social warfare. The closer you are to the host, the higher your rank or the bigger your bribe. Seating mattered more than food, and food was life or death. Here's the catch. This isn't a restaurant. You don't choose the menu. You don't even know what's being served. If you have dietary restrictions, congratulations, they're about to be violated in 6 different sauces. And historians still argue whether guests were genuinely surprised by dishes or if the more elite ones got insider knowledge ahead of time. There's a faint commotion behind the curtain. The host is almost ready. Somewhere, a slave scurries by, holding a tray of figs shaped like little birds. A showpiece. You won't get one. You adjust your toga again. It's still too tight under the arms, still heavy. The folds won't sit right, and you swear it's getting sweatier by the minute. Is it wool? Definitely. Wool was the standard, and now it's sticking to your back like judgment incarnate. A bronze gong is struck, not dramatically, more like a polite ding to say, "Here comes your fate." A slave gestures. It's time. You walk toward the triclinium, heart-thudding mouth already dry, and realize this isn't going to be a dinner. This is going to be a test. The moment you step into the triclinium, the air changes. Not metaphorically, it literally smells different in here. Stronger, heavier, like crushed myrrh, warmed wine, and something vaguely goatish, trying to disguise itself as incense. Your eyes adjust to the low flickering light. There are oil lamps tucked into wall niches, their flames dancing over the gold-threaded cushions and the gleaming bronze of serving platters that are definitely older than your entire family. You're still upright. That's a problem. Romans don't sit at dinner parties, they recline, which is far more glamorous when someone else is doing it. For you, it's a whole performance, one elbow propped just so, one knee bent artfully, one foot carefully, not kicking your couchmate. You've never practiced this at home. There's no space to recline between your straw mattress and your neighbor's cooking pot. A slave points to your assigned couch the furthest from the host. Of course, the lowest rank. It's basically the folding table at Thanksgiving, if the table also came with the looming threat of political irrelevance. You awkwardly ease down onto the cushion, which lets out a faint puff of perfumed dust. Reclining sideways is immediately uncomfortable. Your spine questions every decision you've made today. And then comes the wardrobe malfunction. Because reclining in a toga is not for beginners. It slips. It bunches. It exposes things best left unexposed. You fumble to readjust, pretending not to notice the guest next to you, some smug minor poet smirking behind his goblet. Meanwhile, your shoulder itches from the perfumed oil you rubbed on earlier. Was it too much? Probably. You smell like a lavender merchant exploded. The Romans loved their scents. Not just a dab behind the ears, oh no. They soaked in it. They layered perfumes made from roses, cinnamon, saffron, and sometimes, yes, crushed animal glands. The wealthier the host, the heavier the cloud. Tonight you're marinating in something musky and mysterious, and your nose has already gone blind from it. And it's not just you. Every other guest reeks of competition. Some favor imported oils from Arabia, others boast about having their own perfumer on retainer. You overhear one woman casually mentioning that her scent was a gift from a Parthian prince. Sure it was. Meanwhile, you're hoping the market olive oil you dabbed on doesn't start to congeal. Historically, Romans were obsessed with cleanliness. Public baths scraping tools, called strigils, and enough scented oil to lubricate an entire gladiator match. But under that shine, let's not forget running water wasn't exactly universal. And in close quarters, with people reclining inches from your face, hygiene, anxiety starts to kick in hard. You shift slightly. The couch creaks ominously. Your toga is already making a bid for freedom. You tuck a fold back in place and reach for your goblet, only to realize too late that you're holding it in the wrong hand. Right is fine. Left barbaric. The woman across from you notices. She doesn't say anything. She just smiles. Coldly. Like a cat deciding whether or not to knock over your wine. A slave appears behind you, silent as a ghost, holding a small dish of perfumed water and a towel. You accept the offering only to realize you have no idea what to do with it. Wash your hands. Your face. Both. The poet next to you dabs daintily at his fingertips, like he's cleaning after painting miniatures. You follow his lead, trying to mimic the casual elegance. You splash too hard. Water hits the couch. The towel is damp. Everything is damp. You try to remember your training, which is to say whatever you've picked up watching other people not embarrass themselves. Romans judged harshly. A single olive pit, spat in the wrong direction, a belch at the wrong volume, a stain on the wrong part of your garment. Any of it could get you blacklisted. Social failure wasn't just awkward. It was public. Some fringe historians claim there were entire handbooks written on how to behave at dinner. Others think the rules were mostly unspoken, enforced by brutal side eyes and whispered gossip. Either way, you're clearly behind. A voice booms from the host's couch. Salvete a greeting. The party officially begins. You try to smile, but your teeth feel dry. More slaves file in, arms laden with the first course: eggs, olives, little sausages on skewers, all arranged just so, like edible jewelry. You lean in, remembering to keep your elbow elevated, trying not to look too desperate. The host raises a goblet. To health, he says. You repeat it automatically. To health. Internally, you whisper, please, also to survival. The scent of the food hits you hard, salty, sharp, with that familiar hint of garum. Ah yes, garum. Fermented fish sauce, the Roman condiment of choice. You'd better like it because it's going to show up on everything. Eggs garum, salad garum, fruit, probably garum. It was their ketchup, soy sauce, and vinaigrette rolled into one pungent bottle of why does it smell like anchovies and despair? You dip an olive into the sauce, then hesitate. Is this the right way? Are you double dipping? Is there double dipping etiquette in ancient Rome? The poet next to you goes for it confidently. You copy him, trying to mirror the same breezy flair. Your fingers come away slick and shiny. No napkin in sight. You suck them clean. What else are you supposed to do? A nearby guest gives a soft chuckle. Is he laughing at you, or did someone say something funny? You'll never know. The room hums with overlapping conversations, half of them in Greek, to sound more cultured. You pick out the occasional phrase, something about Cicero, something about a new kind of mosaic flooring, but mostly it's a blur of names, references, and laughter you're not invited into. You sit back, recline, and try to look relaxed. You're not. Your knee is cramping. Your elbow is trembling. Your toga is plotting betrayal. And this is just the gazpacho, the appetizer course. You have hours to go, dozens of dishes ahead, and a host who thinks live flute music is the height of sophistication. You wonder briefly if faking a sudden illness would be convincing enough. Maybe say you have a sacred goose to feed, or that you accidentally joined a mystery cult this morning. Anything to escape the slowly thickening fog of judgment, garum, and lavender. But no, you stay, because you have to, because this party is a ladder, and right now you're clinging to the bottom rung by your fish sauce-soaked fingers. You're trying to settle into your reclining position, but every joint in your body is staging a small protest. Your left elbow's gone numb, your knees starting to twitch, and your hip feels like it's whispering, "You'll pay for this tomorrow." Reclining might be a status symbol, but clearly it's not designed for anyone over 5'8" or with a spine from this century. Still, you're in now. The couches are arranged in a U shape around a central table, each one supporting 3 diners. You're squished in with 2 other clients. The one closest to the host is already hogging the bread basket like it's a family heirloom. The other smells like cloves and smugness. You try not to breathe too deeply. And now it begins, the parade of platters. Slaves, dozens of them, move like clockwork, gliding between the couches with trays of small bites. Boiled quail eggs, smoked oysters, and chickpea fritters appear and vanish with hypnotic rhythm. You reach for something that looks like a tiny pastry, only to realize halfway to your mouth that it's actually a breaded pig's nipple. You pause. Too long. Your hesitation has been noticed. The poet. 2 couches down, raises an eyebrow, then goes back to peeling his fig with the elegance of a man who's clearly done this dance before. You commit. You bite. It's crunchy and surprisingly tender, somewhere between awkward and delicious. You try not to think about the anatomy. This is the prima mensa. The main course is still a ways off. Right now, it's all little tastes and introductions, both culinary and social. The host is watching everything. His eyes flit between guests like a hawk scanning a field of twitchy mice. Laugh too loudly at the wrong moment out. Fumble a toast out. Fail to notice when he makes a reference to Horace Big out. You remember reading once that a Roman host could make or break a man with nothing more than where he placed him on the couches. And you're in the inferior section, no shame, just fact. Closer to the kitchen door than the main atrium. Far enough from the host to make eye contact feel like a breach of etiquette. And honestly, you're grateful. Being invisible has perks when you're trying not to choke on organ meat. As the dishes roll out, you begin to realize just how hungry you were, and also just how strategic you need to be. You reach for a slice of honeyed bread, only to be intercepted by a slave, who's replaced it with a dish of pickled eel. The eel stares up at you, tiny mouth, open eyes cloudy. You blink back. Your stomach grumbles. Eel was a Roman delicacy, especially the kind that had been raised in wine-tinged water. Historians still argue whether certain species were force-fed figs to enhance flavor or if that was just elite culinary gossip. Either way, you're looking at a protein-rich status symbol. You poke it with your fingers. No fork, no knife. Just you, the eel, and your dignity. You try a small bite. It's sharp, chewy, oddly sweet. You pretend to enjoy it. The poet next to you mutters something in Greek and laughs at his own joke. You nod like you understood. You didn't. The conversation around you is heating up. One senator is loudly recounting a story about an amphora shipment gone hilariously wrong, and the room chuckles on cue. Another guest, mid-30s, bald, too much gold in his teeth, is already on his second cup of wine and slurring praise for the host's mosaic floor. You try to focus on your own mosaic of food. The slaves are relentless. They never speak, never smile. Just in out, refill, replace. One gently lifts your goblet, tops it off with something dark and fruity, then slides away before you can mutter thanks. They wear simple tunics, sandals with worn soles. Their eyes rarely meet yours. You've heard stories everyone has about the silent codes these slaves use. A look here, a nod there, perfect coordination. They know the dining order better than anyone. Who gets more sauce? Who gets the rare meat? Who gets what's left over? Some say elite households trained their staff for years, like culinary gladiators. Others say the punishment for getting a dish wrong could mean lashes or worse. The truth probably lives somewhere in that space, between efficiency and fear. A platter of roasted vegetables lands before you. Finally, something familiar. Carrots, onions, parsnips, except they've been glazed in honey and sprinkled with cumin. You reach out. The man beside you coughs, pointedly. You freeze. He motions with 2 fingers, use only 3 when picking food. Index, middle thumb. The pinky is uncivilized. You nod like you knew that. You didn't. There's no plate. Everything goes straight from table to hand to mouth. You're expected to keep clean with the occasional hand-washing bowl and by simply being dainty. You are not dainty. You are starving. But you try. The door opens again, this time, ushering in a low humming sound. A singer, female young, wearing a silk stola, the color of watered wine. She begins a quiet tune in ancient Greek. It's meant to be background ambiance like a harpist in a hotel lobby. You try to appreciate it, but someone near the host shushes her mid-verse to ask if the dormice will be served hot tonight. Dormice. Yes. Stuffed with minced pork pine nuts and dipped in honey, then roasted, the Roman elite were obsessed. You had one once, last Saturnalia. It was crunchy, sticky, and faintly depressing. Not because of the taste, it tasted like seasoned meatballs, but because you had to peel it open like a fig and pretend that wasn't a tiny tail curling off the end. The singer finishes. There's scattered applause. The host claps exactly 3 times, signaling his approval. Another dish arrives, something gelatinous, jiggling ominously on a silver tray. It looks like fish pudding. Smells like vinegar. You try not to panic. This is how the evening will go. One moment you're marveling at a tart of honey and crushed rose petals. The next you're staring down what might be boiled cow uterus. And you'll eat it. Or pretend to. Because not eating is an insult. And insulting the host is like lighting your social life on fire while wearing it as a toga. You glance at the exit. It's there, open, just a short walk. But a dozen eyes would follow you, and worse, your patron would notice. You're not ready for that fallout. So instead you lean forward, pick up the jiggly fish cube and take a bite. It tastes complicated. You swallow the fish jelly with the kind of careful determination usually reserved for swallowing pride or unsentimental family heirlooms. The flavor isn't entirely offensive, just confusing. There's definitely vinegar, maybe dill, and possibly something citrusy. A fig, a lemon rind. Whatever it is, it's been lovingly suspended in what feels like wobbly regret. The host claps again twice this time. The signal is subtle, but clearly understood. The next course is coming, and with it, the pace of the evening shifts. Slaves emerge with bowls of warm water and lemon peels for finger rinsing. Yours arrives tepid. You dab at your fingertips, trying not to glance at your toga, which has absorbed enough food residue to qualify as a new menu item. Now, the secunda mensa begins still, not dessert, mind you, but heavier fare. Meats, game, exotics. You brace yourself as the room begins to fill with the rich aroma of roasted fowl and spiced sauces. There's a rustle of anticipation, a subtle repositioning of elbows and goblets. You hear someone murmur peacock, and your stomach responds with a cautious gurgle. The first dish is paraded in like a royal baby. A whole roasted boar jaw agape, apples tucked in its mouth, its skin glistening with oil and honey glaze. The effect is dramatic. It smells incredible, but there's something eerie about its perfectly posed stillness. One of the slaves slices off a cheek portion and places it before the host, who nods solemnly, then gestures for it to be shared. You don't get cheek, you get shoulder, Still, it's tender fatty and somehow spiced with something both sweet and peppery. Clove. Maybe. Cinnamon, possibly. Romans had access to an astonishing array of spices from across the empire, India, Arabia, even China, through shadowy trade lines. Your taste buds are a little overwhelmed, but at least your teeth have something to do now. Then someone calls out, "Flamingo tongues, next, you freeze." You had read about this in a scroll, or maybe some gossipy bathhouse chatter. Flamingo tongues, once considered the height of indulgent Roman absurdity. They were said to be soft, delicately flavored, a whisper of meat rather than a proper mouthful. You had assumed it was a joke, or at least a one-time dare from a drunk senator. But here they are. Or at least here they come, carried on a tray lined with fig leaves. Pinkish, curved, glossy. You stare, wondering how many flamingos it took to serve 20 people. Probably 20. Math was never your strong suit. A piece is placed in front of you. You look at it. It looks back well, not really, but it feels personal. You chew carefully. It's chewy, a little salty, faintly fishy. More texture than flavor. And suddenly, you're thinking about how someone figured out this was edible. The mind wanders. Historians still argue whether these dishes were really common or more like extreme flex's culinary theater for the 0.01%. There are debates about whether these tongue of this and brain of that recipes were actual nightly fare or just the Instagram bait of the Roman world meant to be talked about, exaggerated, mythologized. But tonight it's real. It's on your plate, and it's chewy. Your neighbor clove guy leans over with a knowing smile. "You'll want to pace yourself," he says softly. "The giraffe liver is usually last, and that's the heavy one." You nod because you're too stunned to question him. Giraffe. Liver, a new platter arrives. Pigeon stuffed with dates and pine nuts baked in clay. It's cracked open in front of you with a flourish, the steam wafting up like some kind of ancient food commercial. You take a bite. It's rich, tender, spiced, and just as you're about to chew the second piece, your reclining elbow slides an inch too far, and you nearly face plant into the central table. You recover barely. Your goblet tips. A thin stream of wine races across the tablecloth like it's trying to escape. You dab at it with a napkin, a real one this time, and manage a sheepish smile. The host doesn't notice. The guest next to him does. She gives you the same look you'd give a dog that licked the cheese tray. You melt back into the cushions and wish you could be demoted further. The wine, by the way, is spiced. It always is. Romans rarely drank it plain. They infused it with herbs, honey, pepper, and sometimes even seawater. This batch is heavy on the resin and sweetness. It tastes like drinking a pine tree dipped in molasses. And yet, it's surprisingly moreish. You sip again, trying to slow down. Too much wine, and you risk blabbering. Too little, and your nerves might scream out loud. The dining room buzzes with a rhythm now. Toasts are flying back and forth. Laughs rise and fall like waves. And food, so much food, just keeps appearing. A whole fish crusted in herbs and rock salt. A platter of skewered songbirds wrapped in bacon-like pancetta. Pickled dormice, a meat pie shaped like Minerva's owl. At one point, someone behind you belches loud, shameless, triumphant. You stiffen, but instead of gasps, there's laughter. Apparently, in this crowd, it's a compliment to the cook, or perhaps an ironic one. Roman etiquette could be maddeningly contradictory. Some elite diners prized restraint, others saw gluttony as a mark of power. You were supposed to eat a lot, but gracefully. Be enthusiastic, but never desperate. Show off your appetite, but keep your fingers clean. You are not doing great. There's a moment when a roasted hare is brought out cooked whole, posed like it's mid-sprint, and you almost say no. Almost. But then the host makes eye contact with your section. Just a flicker. But it's enough. You nod politely, accept the slice, and chew while making a vague sound that frankly could apply to any food or early death. You're starting to lose track of time, of courses, of where your feet are. The couches are suddenly warm. The air is thick with smoke from braziers and spice. Your toga itches, and the wine has started to whisper little lies about how you could totally deliver a clever toast if someone asked. But they don't, not yet. For now, the meat parade continues. Someone tells a story about a senator who ate an entire leopard leg by accident. Laughter ripples again. You try to join in. Your voice cracks. No one hears. And somewhere near the entrance, a new tray arrives. This one's covered. Silver dome, 2 slaves. The room hushes slightly. You hear murmurs, something about ostrich brains. You put down your goblet. You are not ready. You blink slowly, trying to decide if ostrich brains are something your body can physically cope with. The tray is uncovered with theatrical flair, revealing what looks like a custardy loaf studded with herbs. You expect something grotesque, gray, jiggly, organ-like, but this looks like it belongs on a brunch menu. That does not make it better. The host slices a thin portion, gestures, and the slaves distribute. Your slice lands in front of you, trembling slightly. Steam rising with a whiff of thyme and vinegar. You prod it. It resists. You prod again. It jiggles as if mocking you. Someone makes a joke about food for thought. You smile tightly, then sigh and take a bite. It's soft, almost fluffy, mildly gamey, and as much as you don't want to admit it, weirdly palatable, like a savory pudding that forgot what texture brains are supposed to have. You manage a second bite without whimpering. Progress. Across the table, someone raises their cup and recites a line from Virgil, slurred but passionate. It's met with scattered applause. Encouraged, he launches into a second verse, but it devolves into hiccups. A few guests chuckle. The host smiles barely, but gestures for more wine to be poured. You think about joining in. You know some poetry, or at least some lines you once scribbled into a wax tablet in grammar school. But instead, you stay quiet. One wrong reference, and you risk reciting something meant for funerals or livestock auctions. You don't need that kind of attention. Another course arrives: calf's brain fried with leeks and pepper. You weren't done with one brain, but apparently this is the themed portion of the evening. You decline, politely. Someone else reaches across and takes your portion without asking. It's weirdly comforting. A slave refills your cup. You try to wave him off, but he's already moved on. The wine is now heavier, darker, probably mixed with mulsum, that sticky honey wine concoction that can erase your memories and your sense of balance with shocking efficiency. You sip carefully, then immediately regret it. Your lips are numb. You're not sure if that's normal. At this point, conversation is getting experimental. Someone's arguing that Egypt should be taxed differently. Another guest is proposing a new type of bathhouse that incorporates theater. A third man, barefoot and flushed, has declared himself the reincarnation of Romulus and is demanding olives. A platter of goat lungs appears. You don't even flinch anymore. This, you realize, is the midpoint. The moment when the dinner turns from structured performance to unpredictable theater. The wine has loosened tongues and blurred the etiquette lines. People are reclining more deeply, spilling food without noticing. A man in the corner has removed one sandal and is massaging his own ankle like it's owed money. You catch the eye of a woman a few couches over. She's elegantly dressed, gold hair coiled in loops that defy gravity, and she's watching the room like a cat tracking sparrows. She raises an eyebrow at the goat lungs. You smile. She does not. You return to your cup. More platters arrive. Venison soaked in pomegranate sauce. Snails stuffed with garlic paste. Lamb baked inside a hollowed pumpkin. The sheer volume is astonishing. You start to wonder if this is less a meal and more a subtle test. How far can the human body be pushed before it reclines permanently? The room darkens slightly as slaves adjust the oil lamps. Shadows stretch across the mosaic floor. The singer from earlier returns this time, plucking at a small stringed instrument and humming in a minor key. It's soothing, almost too soothing. Your eyes close for half a second, maybe two. You jolt awake to a burst of laughter. Someone has spilled a dish of fermented fish sauce, garum, across their own lap. The smell is immediate, like salted death and week-old anchovy dreams. Even in this well-seasoned room, the garum stings. Slaves rush in to mop up the spill, their faces blank. You notice one wrinkle her nose ever so slightly. Even the trained ones aren't immune. Garum, as you recall, was made by letting fish guts rot in the sun until they liquefied. Then it was bottled, aged, and sold for absurd prices. The best garum came from Spain, or so they say. There's debate among scholars whether it was used on everything or only select dishes, sort of like the Roman equivalent of ketchup or truffle oil. Either way, it is very here now, and so is the smell. You try to breathe through your mouth. It doesn't help. The host claps 3 times. The slaves pause. All eyes turn to the center table, where something new is being unveiled. A cake. A pie. No, it's a roast swan. Whole, white feathers still tucked into its wings like an afterthought. The neck is curled with eerie grace. It glows under the oil lamplight like a creature from a dream or a threat. The poet gasps with joy. Ah, the swan of Leda, he declares. No one asks him to elaborate. You're grateful. The swan is carved and passed around. It tastes like goose, but gamier. Not bad, though part of you is worried that eating a symbolic animal might curse you with poetic dreams for the next 12 nights. You eat it anyway, because now the wine has made you bold, or numb, or both. Then something shifts. The host gestures, and a slave approaches your couch directly. You stiffen, A platter is set down with quiet ceremony, roasted songbirds, tiny delicates spiced with coriander and cinnamon, but they're served whole, heads, feet, beaks. Everyone on your couch looks at you. It's your turn to go first. You reach forward, pick up one bird lighter, then a peach pit, and examine it. You remember reading how Romans believed eating these whole was a sign of wealth, that the flavor lived in the crunch, that the bones were soft from roasting. You put the bird in your mouth, crunch. It's sharp, spicy, oily. The feet catch on your tongue just a little. The skull collapses with an odd pop. You don't gag, but it's a close thing. You chew slowly, deliberately. You don't make eye contact with anyone until you swallow. Then you smile, wide, empty, hollow. They nod in approval. The platter continues. You are part of the machine now. A small, greasy cog in a well-oiled bird-crunching empire. There's a moment brief, almost gentle, when you think it might be over. You've crunched a songbird skull without screaming. You've swallowed ostrich brain and goat lung. Your fingers are sticky, your goblet is empty again, and you've reclined so deeply you might slip between the cushions and just live there forever. But of course it isn't over. From the side doors, a line of slaves enters in eerie synchronization. They carry a tall domed structure on a wooden board, trailing steam and the smell of something. Sweet numb, sweet adjacent, clove heavy. There's murmuring craned necks, the sound of someone hiccuping into a goblet. Then the dome is lifted. Underneath, rising like a culinary hallucination, is a mechanical boar. Not just a roast pig this time, but a whole sculpture made of pastry meat. And gears, yes, gears designed to move. It snorts. It spins. It spits pine nuts from its metal jaws. You stare, blinking slowly. The room cheers. It's part food, part performance, part fever dream. The boar spins again. More pine nuts scatter like ancient trail mix. A few guests scoop them up and pop them into their mouths like it's all perfectly normal. Petronius style, someone calls out. You recognize the name Petronius, the writer of the Satyricon, who satirized excess with dishes just like this. Historians still argue whether his descriptions were parody or actual grotesquely exaggerated truth. Tonight, you're leaning toward truth with a punchline. Then the boar opens, yes, opens, and inside are smaller animals. Roast birds, tiny rabbits, sausages curled like vines. It's edible nesting dolls, Roman edition. Guests clap. Someone whistles. A man shouts, only in Capua. You have to eat something from it, so you settle on a piece of pheasant wrapped in truffle pastry. It's buttery decadent and deeply confusing to your digestion. You're not sure if your stomach is applauding or waving a white flag. But the mood has changed now. The food isn't just food anymore. It's theater, and the guests are part of the show. Your neighbor, the one who warned you about giraffe liver, is now attempting to balance a peeled grape on his nose. Across from him, a woman is reciting Homer while absently peeling quail eggs with a dagger. So as the poet is still singing, though now it's devolved into nonsense syllables. Someone has started clapping along, and you are floating, not literally, but close. The cushions feel like clouds. Your toga is damp with wine and sweat. Your mouth is coated in spice and honey. You're hot, drowsy, full, and beginning to suspect that time no longer exists. More platters arrive though now with less ceremony. It's the 6th hour of the meal, give or take, or maybe the 9th. You're not sure anymore. Dishes appear like hallucinations, a stew of eel and figs. Pine nut custard served in carved melon shells, grape leaves stuffed with fish paste and prunes. You accept what's handed to you. Chew automatically, swallow slowly. Everything tastes both amazing and indistinguishable now. The spices blur, the meats blur, the room blurs. Then the storytelling begins. A man near the host stands and raises his goblet. His tunic is unbelted, his hair slightly uncoiled. He begins to tell a tale of his grandfather's time in the Second Punic War, how he watched elephants crush a Carthaginian supply line and still made it back in time for Saturnalia. It's half memory, half myth, entirely dramatic. Others take up the challenge. Someone tells a story about a haunted villa near Pompeii. Another spins a yarn about a lover turned Vestal virgin who cursed his garden figs. It's hard to tell what's fact, what's fiction, and what's performance. That's part of the magic. And the menace. The host, for his part, remains mostly silent now. He watches, drinks, occasionally signals for more food or music or laughter, like a conductor with a wine-stained baton. The air is thick with the scent of nutmeg and roasted fat. Oil lamps flicker low. You lean into the cushions full beyond reason. You haven't had water in hours. You're sweating through your borrowed toga. Your fingers are trembling slightly. And you still haven't seen the giraffe liver. There's debate among scholars whether giraffe liver was ever truly served at Roman banquets, or if it was one of those elite, only once-in-a-generation delicacies whispered about in upper senatorial circles. But the sheer idea of it imported from Africa, exotic, rare, almost impossible to preserve, was a symbol, a culinary trophy, which is why you panic when the host stands and clears his throat. A silence ripples. People sit straighter, cups lower. Tonight, he says in a voice rich and practiced, we honor the bounty of empire. From the edges of the known world, Persia, Gaul, Egyptus gifts have arrived, but none so curious as this. A slave unveils the next dish. It's a liver, large, dark, rich in color, resting on a silver tray, steaming gently, surrounded by decorative figs and star anise. You hear murmurs, giraffe, Africa, unbelievable. You are handed a slice. It's thin, tender, and smells faintly of clove and iron. You look down at it and realize this might be your breaking point. You chew, slowly, thoughtfully. It's meaty, yes, but there's something else. A sour richness, the kind of flavor that lingers like a secret. Your throat tightens, not from nausea this time, but from sheer overconsumption. You've eaten things that should have disqualified you from polite society, and you're still going. The poet toasts again. This time, he's crying a little to the edges of empire. He declares wine sloshing onto his tunic and the things we find there. You raise your cup weakly, mostly to hide the fact that your other hand is now shaking. The swan, the boar, the bird skulls, the liver. You've made it this far, barely. But you're beginning to understand survival isn't just about appetite. It's about strategy, stamina, knowing when to recline, when to nod, when to chew, and when to fake it. And also maybe about knowing when to pretend you've passed out. You consider it, briefly. But then another tray appears, round, glimmering, covered, and someone whispers, "Now comes dessert." The dessert arrives like a siren in a sea of heavy meats and dense sauces, a moment of sweet reprieve or a cruel joke, depending on how your stomach is feeling. The tray is carried with reverence, steam curling up like wisps of incense. It's covered by a polished silver dome that shines under the flickering oil lamps. The host lifts it slowly with a flourish, revealing an array of brightly colored confections, honey-soaked cakes, candied fruits, and a curious creation made of layered nuts and dried figs pressed into a mosaic pattern that looks more like artwork than food. You blink at the colors and textures, remembering that Romans imported sugar from India, but rarely used it the way you think of sugar today. Honey was their sweetener of choice, sticky and floral, and more often an ingredient in sauces than a standalone dessert. You pick up a small square of the nut mosaic. The texture is dense but pleasant, a little chewy, with a crunch of pine nuts hiding inside. You chew slowly, savoring the hint of cinnamon and rose water. It's different, refreshing, after the relentless savory assault. Around you, others dip their fingers into bowls of fresh pomegranate seeds and scoop up soft cheeses dusted with poppy seeds. There's a lightness now, a gentle easing of the atmosphere, as if the meal is finally winding down, though the wine keeps flowing and the laughter grows louder, more uninhibited. You notice a woman across the room with a small pet monkey perched on her shoulder, nibbling on a date. It's oddly charming, yet completely in tune with the exoticism the Romans prized so highly in their dinner parties. Exotic animals like peacocks and monkeys were not just status symbols, but conversation starters, little wild cards to liven the night. You recall reading that Emperor Augustus once served a peacock that had been dyed with expensive blue pigment, because why not historians still debate whether that was a genuine culinary delight or just a show of decadence so absurd it circles back to comedy. The host leans back, eyes twinkling, as he watches the crowd. Music starts again, a soft lyre and flute duet blending into the murmur of contented guests. You lean back on your elbow, glancing at your fingers sticky from honey and wine. Your tongue feels heavy, dulled by the unending parade of flavors. Somewhere in the background, a slave plays a small harp, the notes drifting over the room like a balm. Suddenly, someone raises a platter filled with thin, crispy wafers made of fried dough dusted with powdered cheese. They pass it around eagerly, and you take one surprised by the salty tang cutting through the sweetness. This sweet-salty contrast is a hallmark of Roman cuisine, a culinary paradox that confuses and delights simultaneously. You wonder if modern chefs could even pull this off without someone yelling fusion disaster. You watch as the poet stumbles, knocking over a goblet of wine, which cascades like a dark river over the floor. There's a moment of stunned silence, then laughter bubbles up, rich and warm, spreading through the room. You smile despite yourself. The meal is almost over, but the ritual isn't. The host calls for silence and stands again, glass raised. Friends, we have eaten well, drunk well, and told tales well, he intones. Let us end with the sweetest gift, libations to the gods. Slaves pour wine into shallow bowls, passing them among the guests. The host dips his fingers into the wine and flicks droplets toward the statue of Bacchus in the corner. You follow suit, flicking a little onto the mosaic floor. It feels like a final blessing, or perhaps a plea for mercy. Either way, you join in. The wine is potent now, honeyed and heavy, slipping down your throat with a burning sweetness that makes your head swim. You blink, suddenly aware of the shadows dancing along the walls, the low hum of voices turning into whispers. Someone starts humming a lullaby you vaguely recognize, something about a shepherd and a lost lamb. The room's energy softens the wild edge of the evening, mellowing into something quieter, more intimate. You look around at the faces, the flushed cheeks, the sleepy eyes, the smiles that seem both exhausted and satisfied. This strange communion of excess and art, ritual and abandon. And you realize with a slight shiver that you have survived. Or at least you have not been banished or vomited upon or forgotten in a corner. For now, you sit back feeling the warm buzz of wine and full belly as the night wraps around you like a heavy cloak. The servants begin clearing the platters and the guests start shifting, murmuring about getting home or perhaps heading to a nearby bathhouse for the final ritual cleanse. You try to stand, but wobble, catching the arm of a nearby guest who grins and slurs, "Welcome to Roman dining, friend. It's a war zone out there." You laugh softly, realizing that this dinner party is not just about food. It's about power, performance, and survival, culinary gladiators in togas battling stomachs and social expectations alike. And you think maybe next time you'll just bring a small snack. You don't realize you're still alive until the cushions sigh under you, warm and wine-stained, and your feet finally touch the cool marble again. The dinner has ended not with a bang, but with a collective groan from stomachs stretched to maximum capacity and minds fogged over with spiced wine and improbable quantities of honeyed lark. Someone's sandal is stuck to a grapevine mosaic. Another guest is giggling quietly into an olive dish, seemingly unaware that the olives have long been eaten. You manage to stand, barely. But survival at a Roman dinner party isn't just about food. You've passed the feast. The hardest part is behind you. That's what you think. That's what you want to believe. But now comes Act 2, the bath ritual. This isn't just a casual rinse before bed. No, this is a whole new performance, an extension of the feast, designed not for cleansing alone, but for further entertainment, reputation polishing, and more than a few whispered conspiracies. Your host, who hasn't stopped smiling since he made you eat giraffe liver, is already disappearing down a hallway, robes flowing, attendants in tow. You follow, slightly dizzy and very aware of the extra 5 pounds now dragging your limbs like lead. The corridor curves inward, lit by flickering oil lamps shaped like cherubs. The air shifts from smoky and wine-heavy to humid and perfumed lavender myrrh, maybe even cinnamon. You breathe it in deeply, regretting it immediately, as your stomach gives a warning lurch. Slaves meet you at the entrance of the baths, handing out thin linen towels and small pots of oil. They look at you the way you imagine airport security looks at someone who clearly doesn't fly, often polite, but deeply skeptical. You try not to wobble. The thermi opens up into a domed chamber, the caldarium with steam rising like a Roman ghost story from the heated pool in the center. The floors are mosaic, of course, and slightly slick beneath your soles. In one corner, someone's slipped. No one helps. They just laugh and keep chatting about property taxes in Sardinia. You slip into the pool, and for a moment, just a moment, it's paradise. The heat soaks into your sore legs. The wine in your veins does a gentle pirouette. You stop shivering. Your brain defogs. You might be crying a little, but it's steam, so no one can prove anything. A man to your left is vigorously using a strigil, scraping oil and sweat off his arms in long, purposeful strokes. The metal makes a faint rasping sound that you feel in your teeth. Romans didn't use soap. They used oil to loosen grime, then scraped it all off with these curved blades, like buttering themselves in reverse. You're handed one. You eye it, politely decline. The other guests are talking now, their voices echoing against the high walls. You catch pieces of conversation drifting toward you like leaves on water. Someone's niece is engaged to a magistrate. Someone else's horse just died under suspicious circumstances, and apparently a senator brought a bear to his last banquet. Not to eat, just for the vibes. You shift deeper into the pool, the heat lulling you into a trance, your eyelids fluttering somewhere between sleep and sentient food coma. But you're jolted awake when someone starts reciting Ovid from the far side of the bath. Loudly, dramatically. Every third line rhymes with a hiccup. You peek and see it's your poet friend, the one who toasted to the edge of empire with red wine in his hair. He's now completely naked, except for a vine crown and a fig leaf that is either artfully placed or simply got stuck. He finishes with a flourish, and there's polite clapping. A woman near the fountain yells bravissimo and tosses him a date. It lands in the water. He eats it anyway. You learn quickly that this part of the night isn't just for soaking. It's for displaying your wit, your body, your immunity to embarrassment. It's where gossip is traded like currency, where fortunes are made or unmade over steamy side-eye, and where one wrong joke about someone's statue collection can get you mysteriously uninvited from every future event in the district. A man sidles up next to you too close and starts talking about garum imports. Garum, the fermented fish sauce. Romans put on everything. He swears he knows a guy who makes a superior blend from the southern coast of Hispania. He tells you it's like ocean thunder on the tongue. You nod. You want to cry. You miss simple salt. In a corner alcove, a few guests are playing dice, using coins and plum stones for betting. They've stripped to loincloths, laughing, slapping shoulders, occasionally shouting "Visit" when someone wins. You see one of the losers quietly pocket a plum stone anyway. No one stops him. Then you notice the host again. He's not in the water. He's seated on a marble bench surrounded by flatterers and draped in a towel that's more ornament than fabric. He's watching everything. Eyes sharp, smile, lazy. This is his true feast, seeing how people move, whom they whisper to, how many times they laugh. His bathhouse is his court, and he is emperor of this steamy micro-realm. Historians still argue whether the bath rituals were a necessary hygienic practice or just another excuse for elite social theater. The line between the two has long since dissolved like oil in hot water. Suddenly, there's shouting from the frigidarium, the cold pool. A few guests have made the plunge, daring each other to brave the icy shock. You hear splashing gasps and the telltale slap of someone slipping and pretending it was intentional. Someone gestures for you to join. You shake your head. No. Your heart is already playing a slow funeral dirge. You'll pass. A slave hands you a new linen wrap and a shallow cup of sweetened wine. You sip it carefully, grateful for the chance to sit near a bronze brazier and pretend to be part of this strange aquatic society. Time drifts. The crowd thins. The heat fades. Eventually, the host rises and claps once. Just once. The room stills. People begin drying off, gathering their things. You do the same, muscles, sore, skin-flushed brain, a hazy mix of stories, spices, and steam. You've survived the feast. You've survived the bath. But as you step back into your sandals, now feeling like soggy sponges, you understand that this was all still part of the dinner party. That for the Romans, hospitality was a form of warfare. The food tested your body, the baths tested your soul, and you're wobbling toward the exit, more soup than man toga, draped like a surrender flag. And somewhere behind you, the host is already planning his next party. You stumble out into the night air like a newborn deer in sandals, skin damp and glowing breath clouding slightly in the cooler breeze. It should be over. Your body certainly thinks it is. Muscles ache in odd places. Your stomach is on strike, and your brain is balancing somewhere between full REM sleep and late-stage jet lag. But remember, this is Rome, and in Rome, no evening ends without one last spectacle. Tonight, it's after-dinner entertainment. Your host has thoughtfully arranged a courtyard performance. You're ushered through an archway past torch-bearing slaves into an open garden lit by hanging lanterns and fire bowls. The ground sparkles faintly with crushed mica dust, and the scent of crushed mint leaves underfoot wafts upward as you walk, an old trick to keep the air fresh and keep guests slightly more alert. The garden is surrounded by manicured hedges shaped into mythical beasts, griffins, hippocamps, one that might be an octopus or just a very ambitious shrubbery. Cushions and stools are arranged in a wide crescent around a low stage. You drop yourself onto a cushion with a groan that startles a nearby flute player. And then it begins. At first, it's just a single dancer, a woman in gauzy silk limbs moving like water anklets, ringing softly with each step. She's followed by musicians, pipes, lyres, and a man with a frame drum tucked under one arm, thudding rhythmically. The music is haunting, hypnotic, like the soundtrack to a very expensive fever dream. You're impressed, honestly. sleepy but impressed. Then things get stranger. Another performer enters this one masked. The mask is grotesque, exaggerated features that seem both comedic and unsettling in the flickering firelight. This is Mimas Roman mime, not the silent beret-wearing kind you're used to. No, this is full-on satirical theater with body humor, exaggerated gestures, and occasional shouting. Think late-night sketch comedy if it were written by someone drunk on fennel liquor and political frustration. The mime begins a scene, and though your Latin is patchy at best, it's clear he's mocking a senator, complete with nasal voice, wobbly toga, and references to some recent scandal involving a runaway ostrich. The crowd howls with laughter. Even the host smirks. You chuckle too, but you're mostly just trying to follow who the ostrich belongs to. A second performer joins him, a woman dressed as a patrician wife, fans snapping with each line, delivering withering barbs about household slaves and accidentally poisoning husbands. The audience is in stitches. Someone spits wine through their nose. You try not to look directly at the peacock perched beside you, who seems oddly invested in the drama. And then come the acrobats. Yes, plural. A pair of wiry performers cartwheel into the clearing, flipping through the air, bending in ways that should not be physically possible, especially after dinner. One balances a jug on her foot, while the other stacks bronze cups on his head. At one point, they form a pyramid with their own limbs, and the audience gasps, then claps, then starts shouting suggestions. The energy shifts from polite amusement to something more unhinged, half sport, half spectacle. It's not just fun and games, though. These performances serve a purpose. Historians still argue whether such post-banquet acts were mere amusement or carried subtextual messages, moral parables, political satire, or even coded commentary on the host's rivals. In this context, a poorly timed fart joke could be both hilarious and career-ending. You glance at your host, who's watching the crowd as much as the stage. He's noting who laughs hardest, who stays quiet, who claps a second too long. It's all performance and all being judged. You pretend to laugh naturally. You hope it passes. A small monkey in a tunic scampers across the stage, tosses a fig at a musician, and disappears into the hedge griffin. The crowd erupts again. You don't even know if it was planned. It doesn't matter. You rub your temples. The music is picking up again, pipes dancing over drum beats like drunk bees. Someone beside you offers a sweetened date stuffed with crushed almonds. You take it without thinking, chew, and instantly regret it. The texture is fine. The taste is suspicious. You glance at the person who offered it. They raise their brows as if to say, "Welcome to the final trial." Just when you think it's winding down, the philosopher appears. Of course, the philosopher. Every proper Roman banquet has one, a designated thinker here to drop a few heavy truths while everyone is bloated, buzzed, and borderline unconscious. He steps forward in a simple cloak, gray-bearded with that unmistakable look of someone who considers fun a tragic byproduct of the undisciplined mind. He clears his throat. You sigh. He begins quoting Seneca, something about temperance and the dangers of indulgence. You try not to laugh. A man 2 seats over whispers, Where was this guy when I was eating dormice fried in goat fat? The philosopher drones on, but nobody's listening anymore. The acrobats are stretching, the musicians are packing up, and someone has started feeding olives to the monkey. The host claps twice the universal signal that the show's over and it's time to either go home or pass out. You stand, your joints crack. You think you've sweat out all the wine, but then you take a step and realize no, you've just shifted it to your ankles. The night air is cool, and the sky is a shade of purple that only appears after several hours of decadence and questionable shellfish. The entertainment is over, but you're still buzzing. Not from excitement, really, from sheer biological confusion. Was that real? Did someone juggle fire while dressed as Cicero? Did the monkey wink at you? You don't know. You don't care. You just know that if anyone offers you another honey-soaked anything, you're going to start quoting Seneca, too. As you exit the garden, you hear someone ask the host when the next party will be. He smiles like a man who has already ordered twice as much garum and 5 new masks. Of course there will be another one. Of course you'll probably be invited, but whether you'll survive it, that's still very much up for debate. The party may be winding down, but don't take that as your cue to vanish discreetly into the Roman night. Oh no, you're not done, not by a long shot, because in elite Roman circles, no dinner party truly concludes until the guests have offered their toasts, or more accurately, their libations and last words. Welcome to the twilight zone of ancient social obligation. You're herded gently, but firmly toward the final gathering place of the evening. It's a shaded portico with low couches hanging lamps and a view of the moonlit atrium. There's a tranquility here, the kind that tricks you into thinking things are calming down. You exhale. Maybe now you can just sit quietly and reflect on that one guy who tried to balance a wine jug on his forehead. Wrong. The moment you recline, a slave approaches with a cup. Another appears with a flask of wine so thick and dark it looks like melted obsidian. You brace yourself. This is Kamasatio, the closing ritual of the feast, where wine is once again the star of the show, but now it comes laced with meaning. Memory and a strong chance of overcommitting to something you don't understand. The idea is to drink and toast the gods, the dead, the living, your ancestors, your lovers, your rival's mother, really, anything that stirs the soul. It's a mix of eulogy and karaoke night. Everyone gets a turn, no exceptions. Someone stands up. To Bacchus, he bellows, sloshing wine over his wrist as he lifts his goblet. Everyone echoes it, to Bacchus. You mumble it too, because why not? He's the wine god. You owe him at least that much, especially after what you did to that amphora earlier. Then someone else rises slightly more serious. To my brother Claudius, who fell from a horse, then soothed the horse and won. There's laughter. You don't know if it's because it's funny or just weirdly impressive. Either way, the tone is set. You're next. The eyes turn to you half-lidded, wine drowsy, but expectant. You panic. You could toast your family, but they're centuries in the future and probably watching Netflix. You could toast the host, but that feels suspiciously strategic. You opt for something vague, too enduring the night. A few chuckles, someone claps slowly. The monkey, who is somehow still around, nods solemnly. You sit down. It's over, or so you think, because now the rules change. The arbiter, Babendi, steps forward. He's the designated master of drinking, usually the person with the highest tolerance or the most theatrical flair. Sometimes it's chosen randomly, sometimes by vote, sometimes by throwing dice into a bowl of wine and seeing who doesn't blink. Tonight, it's a portly man with grape juice on his chin and a laurel wreath that's seen better days. He announces the evening's wine-to-water ratio, 3 parts wine, 1 part water. Oh no, this is stronger than earlier. Much stronger. And you know the Romans liked to dilute their wine, sure, but even they had variations depending on whether you were philosophizing or setting things on fire. Tonight leans toward the latter. The drinking resumes. A song breaks out, half chant, half hiccup. People join in tapping goblets on the table in rhythm. You try to follow, but it's in a dialect no one in modern textbooks bothers to translate. It could be about farming, or war, or particularly difficult sheep. Across the courtyard, someone proposes a skura, a comic challenge. The goal, tell a joke, so scandalous, so outrageous, that even the statues blush. The problem Roman humor is different. One guest tells a story about a toga getting caught in a public latrine and somehow ending in a duel. Another recounts a dinner party where someone tried to pass off pigeon as flamingo. The horror, the scandal, the feathers, you're asked for a joke, you panic again. You try to adapt a knock-knock joke. It dies a slow, wheezing death. Someone asks what a knock-knock is. You say, never mind. The moment passes, barely. There's a brief interlude while someone quotes a few lines of Catullus, mostly the raunchy bits. Someone else challenges them to recite the cleaner verses. They can't remember any. Typical, then comes the moment you've been dreading, the labatio mortuorum, a final toast to the dead. It's a quieter affair. Cups are raised. Names are spoken. Some you recognize. Famous generals, stoic philosophers, even a gladiator or two. Others are personal, to my mother, who taught me to plant figs, but not how to cook them, says one guest tearfully. The group murmurs approval. There's beauty in it. Amid the wine and antics, this is where the Romans show their soul. They remember. They revere. They tie the present to the past with a thread soaked in wine and memory. But then the arbiter shouts something, and suddenly everyone's back to laughing, tossing their goblets into a bronze basin like it's Roman beer pong. You're tired, so tired, and yet you're still here, holding a cup, smiling at strangers, pretending you know which god they just invoked. Historians still argue whether the commissatio was about honoring tradition or just finding a socially acceptable way to stay drunk until sunrise. Either way, it's relentless. Someone passes you a cup with a toasted nut floating in it. They say it's good luck. You believe them. You drink it. Time folds in on itself. The stars above the courtyard spin a little. A slave is now playing a panpipe. Badly. No one minds. The host is swaying and delighted. He's already suggesting another toast, this one to Neptune for inventing fish. Someone yells, fish didn't need to be invented. A philosophical debate ensues. You bow out. You wonder if it would be rude to crawl under the table. Someone has. No one stops them. You've survived the feast, the baths, the performances, the jokes, the philosopher, the monkey, and now this. The wine-soaked finale, where everyone gets philosophical, then forgets what they were talking about. You're a shipwreck of a human, drifting in a sea of garum-scented sentiment and sweet syrupy booze. And yet against all odds, you're still upright, barely. The wine, the toasts, the jokes that didn't land the monkey, that may or may not be hallucinated, all of it should add up to a conclusion. But no, you're still here, still vertical, and that unfortunately means you've unlocked the bonus level navigating the unspoken politics that come after the party ends. Because now comes the exit performance, the social chess game, the moment where leaving is less about goodbyes and more about maintaining your rank reputation and Roman dignity. You stretch, crack your neck, glance discreetly toward the atrium exit. Bad move. 3 other guests notice. They exchange glances. It's not just a door, it's a test. You can't leave too early, or you'll insult the host. Leave too late, and you look desperate. Timing is everything. The host, ever alert, despite the 6 cups of wine and suspiciously red cheeks, stands once again. He's holding a goblet and smiling the smile of someone about to say something final and performative, and you were so close to slipping out. Friends. He begins what a night. There's scattered applause, a few groans, the monkey claps. That might have been trained or perhaps just instinct. He thanks everyone for their wit, their appetite, their company. He says something poetic about how the stars witnessed your gathering and will whisper of it to the gods. You're not sure if that's beautiful or just a well-rehearsed line from someone who's hosted 100 of these. Then, surprise twist, he starts distributing parting gifts. Yes, that's a thing. Wealthy Romans often gave a pufferita little party favors, sometimes practical, like oil flasks or wool cloaks, sometimes ridiculous, like a live goose or a carving of Mercury made entirely from licorice root. Tonight, it's small clay figurines, handcrafted, painted with cheerful expressions. Yours appears to be a satyr holding a wineskin. Fitting. He's grinning mid-jig, much like how you thought you looked during the acrobat's performance earlier. Wrong. So wrong, you murmur thanks. You hope that's the final ritual. But wait, now come the compliments. And no, these aren't tossed around casually. Complimenting the host is its own performance art. Guests step forward one by one, praising not just the food, but the aroma, the service, the poetic timing of the fig course. Someone even praises the decorative marble urns flanking the courtyard. Another bows dramatically and says, "This night will echo in my dreams like the lyre of Orpheus." You want to roll your eyes, but you're in Rome. So instead, you invent something vaguely lyrical. The lamb was tender, you say, and the fig sauce lingered like a memory of summer. The host beams, the monkey sneezes, you survive. Almost. There's one final act in this long, surreal opera departure staging. Guests must leave in a certain order. The most important go first. This signals status. Leaving too early is offensive unless you're very high-ranking. Waiting too long is pitiable unless you're close to the host. And no one wants to be the last person loitering by the fountain, pretending to tie their sandal. Historians still argue whether these departure rituals were rigid codes or just traditions enforced by passive-aggressive stare. Either way, you're trapped in the liminal space between too soon and too late. You hover near the exit, watching for movement. There's a flurry of togas. Someone bows. Another kisses the host's cheek. You seize your moment. As you begin to slip out, a hand grabs your arm. It's your host. "Did you enjoy yourself?" he asks. You smile. Too big. Your cheeks hurt. "Absolutely," you croak. He leans in. "We'll have to do this again next Saturnalia. Something with peacocks this time." You nod as if that's a perfectly normal follow-up to a night of dormice gladiator jokes and surprise mime philosophy. Then sweet freedom. You step past the pillars into the cooler air of the vestibule. A few torches gutter in the breeze. You can hear the faint murmur of the city beyond carts rattling someone singing off-key, the hisses of oil lamps being snuffed. You start walking, but even the act of movement feels suspect. Should you be strolling? Should you look like you're reflecting or hurrying off to deliver scrolls? Because here's the kicker, people watch how you leave. Your posture, your gait, whether you trip over your own sandal or kiss a statue goodbye on the way out. Every choice is political theater. In fact, some sources claim that elite Romans even hired exit tutors, people who trained you on how to leave banquets gracefully. A turn of phrase, a bow angle, a way to say "until next time," that left the right aftertaste. You're winging it. You pass through the front gate and back onto the stone road, head-spinning hands still holding that grinning satyr figurine. You don't know what time it is. Midnight later, a few other guests are ahead of you, staggering, slightly humming snippets of the last drinking song. You think you see someone offering a passing cat some leftover sausages. You half expect to hear a trumpet or closing credits. But no, just the soft scuff of your sandals, the distant bark of a street dog, and the strange fizzy feeling in your bones that suggests you've just participated in something equal parts ridiculous and deeply sacred. You survived. Mostly. Except your stomach, which is threatening to write a formal complaint to the gods. But you made it through the food, the entertainment, the wine, the politics. You maneuvered the maze of status games and fig metaphors. You earned that little clay satyr. You are, at least in the eyes of Roman high society, a dinner guest worth remembering, for now. Because next time it'll be someone else's turn to host. And the stakes will be different. The flavors new, the rituals weirder. Maybe there will be more monkeys, maybe fewer. One thing's certain, if you're invited again, you'd better start training now. You wake up barely. The sun's just peeking over the tiled rooftops, golden and smug. Birds chirp, like they didn't spend the night pretending the world revolved around garum and goat liver pate. And your head. Oh, your head is a marble bust that someone dropped and glued back together with olive oil. Congratulations, you've made it to the morning after. But in ancient Rome, recovery isn't private. Oh no, it's performative just like everything else. And even though your body's still somewhere between this realm and the underworld, there are expectations to meet. You shuffle out of your guest house bed, or guest couch more accurately wrapped in the same wrinkled tunic you wore last night, which now smells like roasted partridge spiced wine and mild regret. Your feet protest your stomach's writing poetry about betrayal, and your mouth feels like someone used it to store dried lentils. Still, there's no time for self-pity, because the morning visit is about to begin. In elite Roman society, you're expected to check in with the host the next day. Think of it as a Yelp review in person, except if you don't show up, you risk being quietly erased from future invite lists. You make your way down the road. The stones are still damp from the night dew, and the city hasn't fully woken up yet. A bakery glows with warmth. Somewhere, someone's hammering something unnecessarily early. You meanwhile are clutching your little satyr figurine like a talisman. Arriving at the domus, you're met by the doorkeeper, who gives you the kind of look usually reserved for half-finished mosaics. Apparently, you're not the first visitor. Indeed, others are already gathered in the atrium, standing politely pretending they're not also dying inside. One man is blinking at nothing. Another is absently petting the host's dog while muttering "no more pigeon ever again." You join them. Soon the host appears, somehow fresher, probably bathed in rose oil and slept on a mattress stuffed with imported goose feathers. He smiles, does the Roman version of finger guns, and says, "Amici, what a night." Yes. You nod, carefully. Too much enthusiasm might wake the headache beast. He claps his hands, and a slave offers everyone a small drink. No, not more wine. This is Posca, a diluted vinegar water mixture, spiced sour, and exactly as refreshing as it sounds. It's what soldiers drink in the field. It also apparently revives the spirit. You take a cautious sip. Your spirit says rude things. And now comes the debrief. You're expected to chat, offer compliments, share your favorite moments. It's like the post-credits scene of the dinner party, light banter, a little analysis, and absolutely no sign that your digestive tract has started passive-aggressively rebelling. You smile. You say things like, "The musician was excellent, and the flaming fig balls were exquisite." You avoid mentioning the mime, or the monkey, or your near-death experience with a flamingo bone. One guest leans in and whispers, "Do you remember when Lucius tried to recite Virgil and instead proposed marriage to a statue?" You nod a little too quickly. The statue's blush is still visible. Historians still argue whether these post-feast morning rituals were more for genuine social connection or for solidifying pecking order. But either way, you're in the thick of it. You're watching who the host laughs with, who he pats on the shoulder, who gets invited to drop by sometime, and who just gets a nod. And you're somewhere in the middle, awkward foreigner entertaining enough not to be shunned, but strange enough to be remembered. Not the worst outcome. The host finally declares the gathering complete and says he must attend to other matters. The gods don't flatter themselves, after all, whatever that means. The group disperses. You step back onto the street, finally free. Now, what you need: two things, food and rest. But Roman hangover cures are not for the faint of heart. You make your way to the market where stalls are already setting up. You pass by the fishmonger, absolutely not the honey stand, tempting, and the seller of mystery street pies too soon. Then you find it a woman selling warm barley porridge, drizzled with a dash of fermented fish sauce. It's supposed to stabilize the humors. Your humors are beyond stabilization, but it's worth a try. You eat, slowly, cautiously. A nearby philosopher in training mumbles that moderation is the anchor of the soul. You resist the urge to throw your porridge at him. You think back over the previous night, the theater of the courses, the chess game of compliments, the absurdity of a society that turns dinner into political theater art critique and philosophical brawl all in one. But here's the thing, it worked. For all the exhaustion, the pomp, the fermented condiments, you were in it. You weren't a tourist. You weren't a footnote. You were part of the spectacle. You were seen and you played the role. Even if that role involved being confused for a table decoration at one point. You limp back to your lodging body, groaning like a Roman aqueduct under stress. And as you finally recline on something soft and quiet, the faint taste of vinegar still lingering on your tongue, you realize you've gained something. Not just indigestion, but perspective. Perspective on a culture that blended opulence with anxiety, tradition with satire, indulgence with relentless self-control, and all of it wrapped up in one seemingly simple thing, a dinner party. You exhale. Your satyr figurine grins from the bedside. Your eyes flutter shut. The next time someone romanticizes ancient Rome, you'll nod and smile, but you'll know they never made it past the morning after. You sleep through most of the afternoon, and you earn it, because surviving a Roman dinner party and the morning after theater demands a level of psychological and gastrointestinal resilience that modern life just doesn't prepare you for. But don't get too comfortable yet, because there's still one final frontier of social survival, the ripple effect. You see, in ancient Rome, word travels fast. Before your sandals are even dry from the walk home, your name is already in circulation. Whispers float from atrium to bathhouse, from forum stalls to household slaves. What you said, what you wore, what you did with your fig spoon, all of it is now public domain. And reputation, it's everything. There's no social media, no status updates. Instead, Rome runs on rumor gesture and good old-fashioned gossip. If the Senate is the brain of the city, the rumor mill is its caffeine. By sunset, your performance or lack thereof has become a micro-legend. You emerge from your nap foggy, but slightly steadier. You're hoping for a quiet evening, maybe some bread, some olives, some silence. Instead, a knock at your door. A message. It's a wax tablet, hastily etched with a stylus, and wrapped in a ribbon smelling faintly of roses and ego. It's an invitation, another convivium, hosted by someone else, someone who was at the last party, someone who enjoyed your wit and hopes you'll grace their cushions. You read it twice. You want to scream into a cushion, but you settle for a slow-motion groan. Historians still argue whether the frequency of these dinner parties was a sign of true Roman sociability or a form of gladiatorial stress disguised as luxury. You're leaning toward the second option. You don't respond immediately. Instead, you pull on your tunic, splash your face with cold water from the basin, and make your way toward the balcony, the public baths. Because this right here is where you must perform your next act of survival damage control. At the baths, social networking happens in wet linen and steam. It's part spa, part gym, part political campaign headquarters. You're hoping to casually control the narrative before it spirals like a drunken senator on a rotating couch. Inside, the air is thick with eucalyptus and ambition. You move from the apoditarium, the changing room, to the tepidarium, the warm room letting your body adjust. Then it's into the caldarium, where the heat nearly knocks you flat. It's like sitting inside a pot of philosophical soup. You try not to think about how many philosophers have literally done that. You sit on a bench, sweat already glistening. A man beside you grunts. Heard you were at Decimus's feast. You smile vaguely. Neutral expression. No commitment. Heard you complimented the figs. Bold choice. You nod. They lingered. He gives a small laugh. You've passed test 1. Others drift in. One praises your posture during the mime sequence. Another compliments your exit timing. You even get a sly nod from a man wearing enough gold rings to sink a trireme. You're managing the narrative. One bathhouse goer soaking in the marble tub says, "They say you outlasted Titus." He puked in the atrium and blamed it on a dog. You smile. I thought that dog looked offended. Laughter, real laughter. You're in. But this isn't just about laughs. This is networking. Romans didn't separate business and pleasure. They made them hold hands and waltz through the garden of social obligation. One man asks if you'd like to accompany him to a poetry reading. Another suggests a morning ride out to the countryside villa of some minor noble with a tame panther. You smile, you nod, you mentally scream. There's even a whisper about a patron who might sponsor your recitation as public readings. Of what doesn't matter. You could recite shopping lists if you say them like you mean it. As you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge pool, you feel strangely powerful, wrinkled, exhausted, and slightly pruned but powerful, because you've cracked the code. You realize now that the dinner party wasn't about the food or even the conversation. It was about exposure, placement, playing the game without losing your soul to the sauce. You dunk yourself in the icy water. You surface gasps, goosebumps, a moment of pure clarity. You didn't just survive a Roman dinner party. You became a part of its aftermath. And now you're being folded into the next layer of Roman social structure. You towel off or get toweled off, thanks Lucius the bath slave, wrap yourself, and head back into the fading day. The forum glows orange with late sunlight. Merchants pack up their goods. A street performer juggles amphorae. Somewhere, someone plays the panpipes slightly off-key. And as you pass a trio of gossiping matrons, you hear your name. They stop, look at you, smile. You smile back, because now you're a story, an anecdote, a name with flavor, and in Rome that's the closest thing to immortality most people ever get. You wake the next morning to a quieter Rome. The chaos is there. Of course, Rome is never truly still, but the tempo has shifted. Less parade, more routine. As you peer out the lattice window, you spot a cart of grapes rolling by, a scribe berating his ink-stained apprentice, and someone sweeping up yesterday's gossip from the gutter. You stretch, sigh, and realize something horrifying: you're still invited. That second dinner party, it's tonight, And as much as you wish you could just RSVP with a soft nope, you know better now. A declined invitation isn't just a scheduling issue, it's a small political incident. Decline enough times and you vanish. Not literally well, sometimes, but socially. You become the absence at every table, the afterthought. So you go, but this time you're prepared, or better prepared. You've done some reading. You've practiced your reclining technique on the floor of your room. You even spent 15 minutes holding a goblet and murmuring clever-sounding half-thoughts to a fig tree. It went okay. Tonight's host is Gnaeus, a friend of your previous host. Not as wealthy, not as flamboyant, but reportedly eager to impress. The kind of man who calls in favors, rents statues, and instructs his servants to rehearse how surprised they should look at each guest's entrance. You arrive at dusk. This villa is smaller, but aggressively decorative. The columns are painted in garish reds and golds. One of them features a badly drawn dolphin wearing a laurel wreath. Bold choice. You're welcomed by an overly perfumed porter who bows with the finesse of a drunken centaur. Inside, the air is thick with saffron and something faintly resembling onions. You do not ask questions. The guest list tonight is even stranger. A retired gladiator who now writes poetry about eels. A senator's wife who speaks only in riddles. A philosopher with one sandal and a permanent sneer. And of course you, the mysterious out-of-towner who knows how to pick a good fig. You recline, you smile, you survive. Because now you know the rules. You nod appreciatively at the honeyed dormice, still weird. You drop casual references to Stoic ethics with a wink naturally. You compliment the host's mosaic floor, even though it depicts a centaur eating a salad. Your fellow diners notice. They comment on your composure, your Roman spirit. One even calls you urbane, which is the kind of compliment that gets you invited to third parties. But it's not all olives and admiration. Midway through the meal, the gladiator insists on performing his eel poetry again. It's titled Slippery Honor, and it lasts a punishing 7 minutes. You survive by chewing a candied quince at half speed. Later, the philosopher challenges everyone to identify whether existence itself is a feast or just the tray it's served on. This spirals into a 10-minute debate over the ethics of licking platters. You stay silent, sipping your wine, trying to look profound. It works. Mostly. Historians still argue whether these social performances reflected sincere intellectual curiosity or were just verbal jousting wrapped in oil and ego. Probably both. But somewhere between the oiled artichokes and the third round of garum-drenched lentils, you feel it again, that weird Roman energy. The mixture of indulgence, performance, and paranoia. Every laugh is partly a maneuver, every toast is a small alliance, and every mistake is quietly recorded by someone's scribe. And yet, you're having a decent time. Maybe it's the wine, maybe it's the fact that no one's tried to feed you flamingo this time, or maybe it's just that the second time is easier. You know the cues. You spot the power players. You dodge the conversational landmines like a pro. You're not just surviving anymore. You're adapting. You even catch yourself offering a quip about Cicero's writing style: too many words, not enough action. The philosopher scoffs, but the senator's wife claps. That's a net win. By the time dessert arrives, some questionable-looking cakes shaped like sea urchins, you're weirdly relaxed. You don't even flinch when someone offers you fermented mare's milk. You just say, maybe next course, and keep it moving. You've come a long way from flinching at fig paste and tripping over reclining cushions. The meal ends with a final toast. Gnaeus raises his goblet and declares the evening a triumph. He thanks each guest personally. When he gets to you, he says, "And our foreign friend, whose tongue is sharper than his knife, may Rome never bore you." Laughter, applause. You bow your head suddenly that in a city built on spectacle, you've become part of the entertainment. And that's not a bad place to be. After the guests disperse, you linger in the vestibule. The porter hands you your sandals. Why were they off? And gives you a wink. As you walk out into the cool Roman night, you realize something peculiar. You're not just part of the Roman dinner circuit now. You're a known variable, a new piece on the board. And maybe, just maybe, you could learn to play this game. You're walking home under a quiet Roman sky. The marble streets are slick with moonlight, and for the first time since you arrived in this whirlwind of social experiments and fig-based trauma, you feel a sense of strange calm. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Because here's the thing about Roman society: just when you think you've cracked the code, it rewrites itself. You're not sprinting towards survival anymore. You're pacing through politics. And trust me, politics doesn't serve dessert until it's sure you've eaten enough tension. You've survived not one, but 2 dinner parties. That's no small feat. Your tunic still smells vaguely of myrrh and goat cheese. Your brain is full of debates, theatrical whispers, and one eel-themed poem you wish you could forget. But your reputation has bloomed like a Venus temple flower, delicate, prized, and easy to trample, because what happens next is the part no one warns you about. Rome remembers. The next few days are a blur of invitations. Not just dinner parties now, but readings, strolls, lectures, even a request to be the guest of honor at a garland weaving contest, which you really hope isn't a metaphor. Your name is on people's lips. You're being visioned in bathhouse conversations and wine shop grumblings. The performer from that first party even imitates your fig commentary in his act. You've become a bit, and that's either high praise or the beginning of your undoing. You're riding the wave, but here's the catch: waves break. Because as your social capital rises, so do expectations. Romans love novelty until they don't. You're exotic, mysterious, clever. For now. But fail to impress next time, spill the wrong joke in the wrong ear, say no to the wrong host, and poof, you're a punchline. Historians still argue whether the volatile nature of Roman status was part of its brilliance or its slow decay. But for you, it feels like balancing a ramp on a knife's edge. Still, you try to keep pace. At a poetry reading, you're asked your opinion on Lucan. You say his metaphors are violent, but strangely comforting. This earns a few approving nods and one intense glare from a senator who is Lucan's cousin. Noted. At a banquet in a seaside villa, you eat something that may or may not be jellyfish. You don't ask, you chew with commitment. At a garden symposium, you are cornered by a group of wealthy matrons who want your opinion on mosaic color theory. You bluff confidently with phrases like, earth tones reflect the soul, and the tessera chooses the space. They adore you. But each performance, each interaction, chips away at your reserves. You're always on, always spinning. It's like acting in a play without ever seeing the script. And no matter how good the food or how silky the couches, you're never just full. And then it happens. You attend a small gathering at the home of a Roman writer, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper stylus. It's intimate, low light, cushions closer together, wine stronger than usual. You let your guard down, just a little. You mention offhandedly that Roman fish sauce might be an acquired trauma. It's a joke, a harmless little barb. But one of the guests, a merchant whose family makes that exact type of garum. The silence after your comment is short but sharp. Someone coughs. Another swirls their wine. You move on quickly, pivoting to a story about dancing goats in Gaul. There's laughter and the tension seems to lift, but the moment's been etched. Somewhere, that merchant is already planning the social equivalent of a mild vendetta. Rome forgives a lot, but it never forgets what it finds inconvenient. You return home that night and lie awake on your thin mattress. You can still smell roasted pine nuts clinging to your sleeves. Your toes ache from another evening of performative reclining, and your mind runs through every word you said, every glance, every gesture. You realize that surviving a Roman dinner party is not just about knowing which fork to use or when to raise your cup. It's about understanding that every bite is a negotiation, every compliment a contract, every silence a risk. This city, it eats people alive. Not literally. Well, okay, sometimes literally, but mostly socially, spiritually, psychologically. You feel it now, that slow creep of fatigue behind your eyes. The weight of being charming on cue, of smiling even when you're full of lentils and regret, of always calculating which version of you should show up next. And you start to wonder, could you live like this forever? Could anyone? The truth is, you probably wouldn't survive much longer. You've danced at the edge of etiquette, played your part, navigated the fish sauce and fig mines. But Rome is a machine that never sleeps, and eventually it grinds down even its brightest stars. You sit up, look out the window. The moon still hangs above the city, casting silver shadows on the tiles. And in that soft glow, you finally admit it. You miss your old meals, the ones without politics, the quiet bread and cheese shared in peace, no performance, no plots, just food, and maybe a nap. You lie back down, let the weight of Rome fall away, because dinner is over, and so is the act. Now just let the city fade, let the marble walls fall quiet. The torches flicker to stillness. The echo of laughter slip into the shadows. The final goblet has been emptied. The cushions are sunken and cool. The echoes of poetry gossip and questionable seafood have finally drifted out with the night breeze. You're safe now. Outside the games, the whispers, the endless balancing act. You can close your eyes without scanning the room, without worrying if your last toast was too enthusiastic or your posture not quite reclined enough. The noise of Rome still hums soft, distant, but it no longer presses in. Feel your breath as settle into the rhythm of your body. Let your limbs grow heavy, like amphorae tucked into a shaded cellar. The scent of roasted almonds and violets lingers gently in the background. You're not a guest anymore, not a performer, not a target, just here. In the silence that follows spectacle, there's space for stillness. A place where the only expectations are rest, and the only performance is the slow, steady movement of dreams rising up from sleep. You've survived something absurd, grand, delicious, exhausting. You wore the toga, you drank the wine, you stared down eel poetry and lived to tell the tale, and now you can sleep. Because tomorrow Rome will rise again, but tonight you don't have to.